Vidyadan Foundation for Education, in collaboration with Society for Integrated Development of Himalayas, organized a seminar on Indian perspectives of education from 20th to 23rd September 2012. He's one of the trustees of Krishnamurti Foundation, and more than that, like Professor Krishna said, he set up at least 3 schools that I'm aware of. He'll tell us more about these schools.
20 minutes.
Say something, Kabir, say something.
Hello, Pulak.
Do you see the red light on?
Yeah. Hello, Pulak.
Yeah, fine. Don't tap it. We can hear you.
You know, there is no particular methodology or system that Krishnamurti offered for this vision of education. And I think that's just right, because the movement of learning cannot be caught within a system. It's not merely applying a particular method and repeating it over and over again. And perhaps, if we are concerned with the learning mind, a mind that is in the movement of learning, it's not a system or a method, but an approach. Approach means coming close to something. To approach something is to come close to something. So the question becomes, what would be the approach which can bring about a movement of learning, which can nurture a movement of learning? Each of these schools has had groups of people coming together, very deeply interested in Krishnamurti. Not so much Krishnamurti. I use the word Krishnamurti merely as a short form for inquiring into the whole movement of life. It's not really about the man, it's not about the person, it's not about constantly having to repeat what he said, but it's more about the act of learning. So each of these schools have had people who have come together, who have faced particular situations, particular social conditions, and tried to meet these challenges, tried to meet these various kinds of demands in different ways. So one of the nice things about the Krishnamurti schools is each one of them has a certain unique character, and there is no attempt other than through dialogue to come upon something common. We can learn from each other, but we don't try to impose anything on each other. Professor Krishna talked about certain aspects, certain things which prevent learning, and he talked about no fear, no reward, no punishment, and no competition. I'd like to add one more very, very important thing which I feel he would have added: no comparison. Psychological comparison of any kind brings about the whole movement of separation, the movement of jealousy, the movement of fear and anxiety. So it's a profound challenge for the teacher, for the adult, to educate without comparison. And of course, it's taken for granted that both the teacher and the child are perhaps comparing. I perhaps have this movement of comparison, this social conditioning, this very strong human conditioning within them. So, either we throw up our hands in despair, or we say, what does it mean to learn about it? Perhaps in the teaching of subjects, I may have a certain advantage. I may have gathered more skills, gathered more knowledge, but in the actual learning about myself, I may be at the very same level as a child. So it's learning together, actually, about how fear comes into being. So because I can tell the student very honestly that look, there's fear in you, there's fear in me, let's learn. To learn means to learn the art of observing. Observing that which I'm looking at without distortion. To observe what I'm looking at without choice, without wanting to escape from it. Hence Krishnamurti's great emphasis on the three great arts of observing, looking and listening. I will tell you briefly, I'll tell you about one school that I'm involved with right now. It's called Shibumi. I'm going to tell you about it merely because it's fresh in my mind and it's very easy for me to talk about it. So there are some features of Shibumi which might be of interest to all of you. So I'd like to share what I consider some of the important features of Shibumi. It's a school that came up in Bangluru about 3 or 4 years ago. It was started by a group of people, amongst them my former students I had taught for 10 years, 12 years, right through the school education, and who had in fact stayed on for what we called a post-school program, because they were very deeply interested in learning about themselves, and they were also very interested in coming into education. So we had this group of students and they said, we would like to start a school, can we do it together? And that's how the school began. It began not through a decision, but through a long period of dialogue, through a long period of learning, examining, questioning, not about education, but about ourselves. So we used to meet for week after week for about 2 or 3 or 4 years. And then this question of bringing a school, trying to create a school, came about very naturally. There is no hierarchy in the school. We work as a group. There's no principal, there's no director. And also what was interesting for me is it started really with no assets whatsoever. There was no land, there was no building, but that didn't seem to prevent or stop the school from coming into being. I'm not praising ourselves, but I'm trying to say perhaps if a group of people come together to say we really want to do something, they find ways of doing it. Maybe windows open, doors open. I don't know how it happens, but it seems to me that it's possible. And in the case of Shibumi, I really saw it happen. I'm also, we had some 12 or 15 years ago, we had started a school called Center for Learning, where again a group of us had come together. We started in the house of a friend. Each of us wrote to 10 friends saying that we would like to borrow 1,000 rupees from each of them, non-returnable loan. And that gave us 1,00,000 rupees, and that's how we started. I think that's possible for any group of people to do it. Any group of people have access to that kind of resource. So here, there was just a website which outlined what the intention of the school was, which outlined the educational vision of the school. And the whole thing started with parents coming and writing to us and saying, we'd like to put our child here. And out of that money, a house was rented and the school was created. So that was something about how the school began. It's right now located in a small farm just outside of the city of Bangalore. A very nice place. As Professor Krishna mentioned, it seems very important that children should have a great sense of contact with nature, not be confined to classrooms. Hence, even though it seems impractical, to try to find ways and means of putting children in contact with nature. This place has about 42 children. There are no classes. There's no such thing as a child in class 1 or class 2 or class 3. And there are students all the way from the age 6 to 18. So some students might be getting ready for examinations. Many of the children are getting their first basic skills in the place. And we have not felt the need to divide it up into classes or into a particular yearly curriculum that all children should follow. We have tried our best to create, really as far as possible, an individualized program for each child. That doesn't mean two children will not be doing some of the same things, but they may be doing it at very different times, and they may be doing it at very different speeds. So two children may be learning fractions, but one child might need 5 weeks to learn fractions, and the other child may be able to learn it in 2 weeks. But there's no attempt on our part to try and speed up the process. I feel as a teacher that the basic skills that we are trying to impart, the child must have ample leisure to learn, to be confident in those skills, and not be hurried through the process merely because I have something to cover. As they grow older, a lot of the learning happens through what could be called self-study programs. We find the material, we create material, we identify material. The teacher is there to help, to guide, to assist, to raise questions, to perhaps help in looking for answers to questions. But it is not, very, very rarely is it what could be called a normal classroom situation, where the teacher is at the blackboard giving instructions or giving concepts, and the student having to absorb those concepts at the speed that the teacher gives. So students are doing different things. We also try through observation, through dialogue, to find out what are the kinds of things that interest them, and we try to put them in contact with people, if we don't have the skills, with people who have far greater skills than us, to help the children grow in areas of their own particular interest. That's one of the most important things, because really to help a person discover what he loves to do, and therefore what he does is not coming out of ambition, it's not coming out of some kind of discontent or dissatisfaction, but there's a great quality of love in what one does. I think it's part of maturing. I don't think it's the very end of it. I don't think one's whole life should be spent in just doing what one loves to do. But in starting with that, in doing something in which there is no resistance, there may be a movement which can lead to far deeper and more profound questions as they grow older. We do not have a system where we say at so-and-so age you're in class 10. When we see that a student has a certain kind of maturity, that in a very natural way he's capable of systematic work, he's capable of sustained work, we sit with the student and with the parents and then say, shall we think of an examination if you want to? We help train them for examinations if the student wants to. But I think we are quite ready to have students who might say, I really do not want to do examinations, but help me get enough skills to be able to earn my livelihood without having to go through the process of examinations. Personally, I do not want to impose an ideology of any kind on anybody. Right? I do not want to say, my ideology says that you should do this or should not do that, and therefore I want you to do this or not want to do that. I think it's far more important to help the person discover what he loves to do. So, around the age of 15, normally we find that children are capable of that kind of work. We sit down, we help them decide what kinds of subjects they want to take, when they want to take examinations, and then the act of learning for examinations begin. And they can, in this particular place, if they wish to stay with us, continue their studies till they qualify, they get ready for the college. I have also done programs so that if students want to stay on with us, even after finishing high school, there are ways of using distance education programs, there are ways of using resources around so that a young person who is really deeply interested in self-inquiry can have the opportunity to give a lot of time and energy for that. So that's also possible. So I have talked about what could be normally called the curriculum of the school. But a great deal of energy is given to learning about oneself. Now, learning about oneself really means learning to observe oneself in one's daily relationships. Because what is called myself reveals itself in my daily relationships. My hurts, my fears, my anxieties, my wanting to have power over and domination over somebody, my wanting to bully somebody, my wanting to hang on to a particular pleasure. All these, after all, get revealed in one's daily life. So, a lot of energy is given to learn about oneself through just the simple, careful, choiceless, non-condemnatory examination, watching and observing of oneself in one's daily life. That's a great intention of the school. Again, it's not something that's imposed. So if students, after the age of 15, they have done some examinations and they feel they really want to go out into the world, they're free to do that. There's no sense of alienation, there's no sense of failure. But if students want to stay on with us and move deeper in this dimension, there is also scope for that. That's something about Shri. Thank you.